Traveling as an athlete can be tough. Worrying about the journey itself, your kit, your bike, being in a new location, add nutrition onto that as well, and it can feel a little bit overwhelming. However, the nutrition side of things doesn't have to be so difficult, and a little bit of thought here can go a long way. With a little bit of planning, you can reduce the likelihood of any sort of illness or upset associated with your nutrition and travel, and turn it into a positive experience where you're ready to perform at your best at the other end. If you're new here, by the way, then hey, I'm James. I'm a sport and exercise nutritionist and spend a lot of my time talking about those things. As some of you know, I race in triathlon as well, and this video came about because I'm heading to Valencia at the end of the month to race for Great Britain in the European Age Group Championships. I had been thinking about the things that I'm going to mention in this video and figured that actually there'd probably be a lot of other athletes out there who would benefit from this sort of advice. So here's a video on it for you. I've split the advice into 7 different areas for you, and some of them are general advice and pointers to get you started and thinking about your travel scenario, and others are more specific targeted advice. Okay, so let's get into the first one, which is all about planning. It's worth doing a bit of research on the old internet about the area that you're traveling to well in advance of your actual journey. You want to research specific topics, and these might be things like what the local cuisines are, whether the water is safe to drink, what the general food standards are, and whether there are any time zone differences that might affect you. This helps give you a roadmap for everything else. You can work out pretty easily whether this is going to be a straightforward trip or whether it might require a little bit more thought and planning. So on to a more specific tip, and this is to consider the journey itself and the food you might need to take for it. Are you just doing a short trip that's just a few hours long? Or is it a long haul flight, potentially with a stopover? Find out things like whether there's food included in your flight, or whether you're going to have to take food for the whole journey, or perhaps whether there's somewhere reputable that you can buy food from when you stop. Often it's best to take your own snacks, and usually I would advise taking more snacks than you think you're going to need. Not to just scoff if you're bored while you're waiting for your flight, but to deal with unexpected scenarios like delays. It's no fun to be stuck without food, and it's definitely not going to help you with wanting to be able to perform at your best at the other end of your journey. As well, bringing your own food means you're much more likely to eat nutritious food that's beneficial for you, and food that you get on with and enjoy, rather than just being forced to buy something because you don't have any food on you. And the final point on this is just check in advance with your airline to consider what food and drink you're allowed to take through security, so that you don't have any unnecessary hold-ups or problems there. You should also read up about your accommodation in advance. Is it self-catered? And if it is, does it have all of the equipment and utensils that you think you're going to need to be able to cook all of the food that you would want? Does the restaurant have... And can you have a look at the menus? If not, could you contact the hotel and ask for the menus in advance, just so you can see what type of food that they might be providing? And if it doesn't have a restaurant, then start searching in the local area in advance to see what restaurants you might be able to go to. If you're part of a team or group, by the way, this can be a great strategy. You can contact a restaurant in advance and ask whether they might be able to provide regular catering for you, and catering that is more likely to suit your team or your group's needs. Another super handy tip, if you're not in self-catered accommodation, is to remember your kettle. That wonderful kettle. Well, if you have one, that is. But kettles can be brilliant. With a kettle, you can simply make things like couscous or noodles, and that means that you could pair them with some vegetables and some ready-made protein sources. For example, you could go with things like tinned tuna, pulses or legumes, or something like pre-cooked and packaged chicken. What a versatile kettle that is. It's also important to remember your hydration when you travel and not just focus on food. Pack a couple of water bottles for your journey and make use of places that you can refill them. So think things like cafes or restaurants. Electrolyte tablets or supplements can be useful here as well, especially if you're traveling to warmer climates. Which also brings me on to hydration for wherever you're traveling to as well. Especially if you're traveling to somewhere with a warmer, nicer environment, and that's not difficult if you're coming from England, don't go crazy in the first few hours and spend loads of time in the sun and cook yourself before you even realise what you're doing. Keep drinking, including electrolytes, and be sensible about where you spend your time. I know it's tempting, but don't spend loads of time pre-race touring and exploring the local area, visiting the athlete village or race HQ, or something like that. If you can, save all of your tourist stuff for after the race. If you do decide to eat out, then especially before a race, go for sensible options. This means opting for plainer foods like fresh vegetables, a carbohydrate source like pasta, and a more traditional protein option like chicken, unexciting fish, or tofu. If you start going for exotic meals or foods, ones that you've never tried before, then you are much more likely to run into gastro problems associated with this. Save the fine dining and weird and wonderful foods for after your race, just to make sure that if you don't get on well with it, it's not actually going to cause you any problems. Another way to improve your nutrition while traveling is to bring your own of certain things. My advice here is for 3 specific areas, and that's favourites, supplements, and Tupperware. Yep, Tupperware. If you have any food favourites that you just can't live without, or you have something like a pre-race food ritual, then make sure you bring that with you. It's quite likely that you can't actually get hold of that food, or it's a lot trickier to find and you might be stuck without it. So just pack it in your suitcase so that this doesn't cause you any sort of problems. For example, for me, when I go to Valencia, I have a certain rice pudding which I really enjoy and get on with, and I'll be having that before my race. So I'm just going to make sure that I take it with me, and then that's sorted. Also, just consider where you're then going to put that food. It's probably going to have to be in your hold luggage rather than in your hand luggage. If you use any supplements, then make sure you take them with you. If you do use any supplements, then you should use supplements which have been tested by a program like Informed Sport, and they should be supplements that you have already tried and tested. And on this as well, I would strongly advise that you do not buy something like protein bars in a country or area that you don't know and you don't specifically know the product. You probably don't know what the manufacturing standards are like and whether there's any risk of contamination of banned substances. So it's not worth the risk, and just plan in advance and be sensible about what you buy and eat. And I have done a video on supplement guidance for athletes, by the way, which I would encourage you to watch if you haven't already, and I've linked that at the top of the screen for you. Another super useful thing that you can do when traveling abroad is to take your own Tupperware. I know it's not always practical because Tupperware can be slightly bulky, but it can really help to keep your nutrition on track. It means that you can do things like make and store leftovers, which you can then take with you if you're traveling out and about. This will help to ensure that you're eating the right kind of foods that you've prepared and reduce the risk of contamination from restaurants or foods that you just aren't sure of the food quality. The last thing to consider is food and general health hygiene. Do the basics right here. Wash your hands before you're going to eat food. Try to reduce contact with high contamination surfaces like door handles, and wear a mask in public places, especially on things like public transport, so think buses or planes. I know it might sound like overkill, but if you wake up with a cough, cold or fever the day before your race, you're going to wish that you had paid more attention to your hygiene. Upper respiratory tract infections are so common when it comes to traveling, as are things like gastro problems, so you just want to reduce the risk of anything like this so that you can actually race and race to your best. So it's just worth being meticulous and really considering your hygiene in the days or week leading into your race. And that just about wraps it up for today's video. As a reminder, the 7 key areas to consider are internet research in advance of the area that you're going to, nutrition for the journey itself, accommodation, hydration, eating out, bring your own, and hygiene. So I hope you found this video useful, and I would really appreciate it if you haven't already to give the video a thumbs up and press subscribe. Remember to press that notification icon so that you get an alert when I release a new video, and remember that subscribing is free. If you're racing away from home soon, good luck and enjoy it, and let me know in the comments how you get on. Otherwise, I will catch you in the next one. See ya.